You are looking at a quarter acre, the size of a suburban backyard. With the right plan, it yields 2,000 pounds of food a year, enough vegetables, eggs, and storage crops to feed a family with 0 grocery trips. I've mapped every crop, every seed, every date. The math is shocking. The secret to year-round food isn't more land, it's a plan. And I'm about to give you mine, crop by crop. Most people believe you need 5 acres and a tractor to feed yourself. That is a lie that keeps you dependent on grocery stores. A quarter acre is exactly 10,000 square feet. I have the planting schedule, the seed varieties, and the harvest dates that turn that small patch into a grocery store that restocks itself every single morning. I spent 2 years getting it wrong. I planted tomatoes and peppers like every garden book told me. I harvested enough salsa to drown a neighborhood and nothing to fill a stomach in January. Then I found a study from a homestead in Vermont that had tracked every ounce of food from a quarter acre for 5 years. Their numbers did not lie. They produced 2,000 pounds of vegetables, over 100 dozen eggs, and enough storage crops to skip the produce aisle from October through June. And they did it with a planting schedule so precise you could set your watch by it. The secret is not in the soil or the seeds. It is in the selection. Most people treat a garden like a hobby. If you want a year of food, you have to treat it like a supply chain. And the choke point in that chain is something almost nobody plants. That choke point is a crop so cheap at the store, you have ignored it your entire life. Potatoes. Not the fingerlings in a mesh bag for $5 a pound. Old-fashioned storage potatoes. Russets, Kennebecks, Yukon Golds. A row of them, the length of a single car, returns 50 pounds of food on less water than any grain and on soil that would starve corn. The math is brutal and beautiful. A pound of raw potato contains about 350 calories. 50 pounds gives you 17,500 calories. That is enough energy to keep an adult breathing for 6 days from one short row. And potatoes store for months in nothing but darkness and cool air. No canning, no freezing, no dehydrator. 4 inches of soil and a layer of straw, and food marches out of the ground in October ready to sit in the basement until April. The homesteads that reach 60% self-sufficiency on a quarter acre all do the same thing. They plant potatoes first and plant them huge. But potatoes alone are a famine waiting to happen. The Irish learned that in 1845, you need the second crop, the one that turns a pile of tubers into a full diet. Dry beans, Vermont cranberry beans, black turtles, Jacob's cattle. Planted in the same space after the early greens bolt, they climb the same trellis that held peas in April. 100 square feet of pole beans gives you 15 pounds of dried beans. 15 pounds is over 50,000 calories, and it will sit in a mason jar on the shelf for 3 years without losing a single nutrient. The 2,000-pound harvest from that Vermont homestead included 500 pounds of storage roots and 80 pounds of dried legumes year after year. They tracked the exact planting dates. The 3rd week of April, potatoes go in the ground. The 1st week of May, peas and spinach. June 1st, the pole beans replace the peas. Late July, the fall carrots and beets replace the garlic you pulled. It is a machine. And the fuel for that machine is a planting calendar that never lets an inch of soil stay bare. Here is the moment that shifts the entire plan from a garden to a year of food. Most people plant once in May and harvest once in September. You cannot feed yourself that way. Succession planting is the practice of following one crop with another in the same bed the same day the first comes out. The space that grew 30 heads of lettuce in May can grow 10 bush winter squash plants in June, if the transplants are ready. That same 60 square feet produces 50 pounds of squash by October, hard-shelled delicatas and butternuts that sit on the pantry shelf giving off the scent of soil until March. Now triple that across every bed in the garden. The Vermont homestead ran 8 full crop rotations in one season across their quarter acre. Lettuce gives way to squash, squash gives way to fall spinach, and the garlic border never moves because it repels the deer. You stop seeing empty dirt as rest and start seeing it as stolen calories. The pivot nobody talks about is this. You do not need more land to double your harvest. You need a calendar and a tray of transplants on a 6-week rotation, And when you run the numbers, the land you have already produces enough vegetables to pack a chest freezer and a pantry for 2 adults from July to July. The only gap is spring, the months when stored food runs thin and new plantings are still inches tall. That gap is closed by 4 crops no grocery store carries in winter. Asparagus that pushes up in late April before anything else. Overwintered spinach planted in September and harvested under row cover in March. Rhubarb that comes back for decades. And a small patch of forcing chicory whose roots you bury in damp sand in the cellar until February. Then bring into the dark to grow white torpedoes of Belgian endive with 0 light and 0 heat. Those 4 crops buy you 40 days of fresh food on the worst side of the calendar. And after 40 days, the peas are snapping and the cycle rolls forward again. But this plan has a fault line, and it runs straight through the one thing you cannot control: water. The quarter-acre food machine I have laid out works in Pennsylvania and Vermont. But if you live where the rain stops in July, every calendar collapses. There is an Amish farmer in Lancaster County who fixed this 70 years ago with a system that runs on no electricity and no well pump. And I found the plans drawn on a single yellow sheet in a barn. It changes where you can grow food forever. The system is a rainwater cistern buried beneath the barn floor. Not complicated. Not expensive. A concrete tank with a single downspout running from the roof, a sloped floor that settles silt into a sump, and a hand pump that brings water to the surface at 4 gallons per minute. The roof of a 20 by 30-foot barn catches 36,000 gallons of water in a normal rainfall year in Lancaster County. That same barn housed 10 Jersey cows, 30 laying hens, and a family of 8 from the same rainwater for 4 decades. No well permit, no electric pump, no monthly water bill. And the water that leaves the barn as manure and bedding goes straight onto the garden through a single rule: everything runs downhill. The Amish call it a bank barn. The animals live on the lower level, the feed and hay on the upper level, and gravity moves the nutrient flow from the barn to the fields without a single machine. When I saw the plan on that yellow sheet, I realized the water problem was never about scarcity. It was about capture. The average quarter acre in this country receives over 100,000 gallons of rain a year. Most of it runs off into the street. The Amish captured it, stored it, and used every drop 3 times before it left the property. The barn roof caught it, the animals drank it, the manure fed the garden, and the garden fed the family. That closed loop is what made the quarter-acre harvest possible even in a drought year, while neighboring farms with wells were buying water in trucks. But that same yellow sheet held a second drawing I almost missed, and it was not about water. It was about the one input that no garden alone can replace: protein. The chickens were drawn as small squares moved across the garden in a rotation. A chicken tractor, 10 feet long, 4 feet wide, a wooden bottomless box with a roof that slides over the beds after the potatoes come out. 40 birds in that tractor eat every slug, every weed seed, every grub in the soil, and they turn it into eggs and manure in a single pass. The drawing showed the tractor moving 1 bed per week. 40 birds produce about 300 eggs a month at peak. 3 months of that pattern gives you 100 dozen eggs, and the soil behind them is richer than it was before. The same quarter acre that grows the vegetables grows the protein that feeds the people, and the two systems feed each other. The garden feeds the chickens feed the garden, and the family skips both the feed store and the supermarket. Then the detail that knocked the wind out of me. The yellow sheet had a date in the corner: 1952. The Amish had solved the quarter-acre self-sufficiency problem before most of us were born. They did not need a university study or a government grant. They needed a barn, a cistern, and a chicken tractor. And when I cross-referenced that drawing with the Vermont homestead's 5-year records, the numbers matched almost exactly. 2,000 pounds of vegetables, over 100 dozen eggs, enough storage crops to carry a family through winter. The system was not only possible, it had been quietly running in Lancaster County for 70 years, while the rest of us read garden books that told us we needed more land. But that yellow sheet held one last number I cannot explain without showing you the full planting calendar. It was the crop that covered a third of the garden, a crop nobody plants in a backyard, and it was the reason the family of 8 never bought a bag of flour from the day the barn was built. That crop was wheat, hard, red winter wheat, planted in September after the onions come out, harvested in July before the fall carrots go in. A 30-foot by 20-foot patch, barely the footprint of a one-car garage, yields 60 pounds of grain. 60 pounds grinds into 50 pounds of whole wheat flour, and 50 pounds of flour bakes 80 loaves of bread. That family of 8 ate bread every day, from grain that grew on less ground than their living room, and they never touched a bag of store-bought flour again. The Amish planted wheat in a rotation that never exhausted the soil. Wheat followed beans, which fixed nitrogen. Then potatoes followed wheat, breaking pest cycles. The yellow sheet had it all mapped in a 4-year cycle, so simple a child could trace it. The threshing happened in the barn aisle. Flails made from 2 ash poles connected by a leather hinge beat the grain heads against a clean floor. On a breezy day they poured the broken chaff from basket to basket, and the wind carried away everything but the heavy kernels. No engine, no threshing machine. Then a hand-cranked stone mill bolted to the barn beam turned the grain into flour, in the time it took to tell a story. 1 hour of cranking gave them enough flour for a week of loaves, and the mill cost $12 in 1952. Today you can buy the same mill for $60, and it will outlive your grandchildren. Here is the completed plan. The quarter-acre splits into 7 parts. Bed 1, potatoes, 500 square feet. Bed 2, dry beans and corn interplanted, 600 square feet. Bed 3, winter squash, 400 square feet. Bed 4, onions and garlic, 300 square feet. Bed 5, the spring greens followed by fall carrots and beets, another 400 square feet. Bed 6, wheat or oats, 600 square feet. Bed 7, the asparagus, rhubarb, and overwintered spinach, 300 square feet that stay year after year. The chickens move through every bed on a rotating tractor, scratching, fertilizing, laying. Rainwater from the roof fills a cistern no bigger than a truck toolbox, and the whole system uses less water than a suburban lawn. The work averages 6 hours a week from April through October, and the output feeds 2 adults every day for 12 months. And the final detail I haven't told you about the yellow sheet. In the margin, in faint pencil, there was a number. A single box had been drawn around the sunflower patch at the garden's edge, and beside it the farmer had written 2 gallons. A row of sunflowers 50 feet long produces enough seed to press into 2 gallons of cooking oil. The Amish knew that oil comes from the same ground as flour. They knew that a quarter-acre with sunflowers, wheat, beans, potatoes, squash, and 30 chickens has no dependency on anything but rain and soil. And they proved it for generations while the rest of the country forgot. Which brings me to the one thing the Amish farmer told me before I left, the line I have carried with me through every seed catalog and every planting calendar since. It is the reason this plan works even if you have never held a hoe. He looked at my notebook and smiled. The soil does not measure in acres, he said. It measures in attention. A quarter-acre, with a man who watches it every day, will outproduce 100 acres with a man who only visits on Saturday. That line rewired my brain. It is not about land. It is about being present. And if you have a quarter-acre, the plan works if you treat it like a daily handshake, not a weekend chore. So I'll ask you, if you could grow only one crop from this entire plan this season, which would it be? Drop it in the comments. I read every one, and your answers decide what we cover next. Hit subscribe for the next video where I show you the chicken tractor build. And if this made sense to you, I've put the complete planting calendar with every date, variety, and spacing into a single document. The link is in the first pinned comment. Plant something this week. The first step to a year of food is the one you take before the ground even thaws.